Right, part 2 of the old Doddy builds. Let's go! Also, I'm not going to do this one in missions because I'm still farming that bloody backpack. I hate my life. Up first, we have my UK America build using the FAL, which is the original British AR. Everyone loved the FAL. It is top tier. British engineering. Along with using 4-piece True Patriot, all with critical hit damage rolls, 2 critical hit chance mods, Seska backpack, and a Grupo chest with glass cannon. This gives us a wonderful collection of 59% critical hit chance and 144% critical hit damage. Utilizing True Patriot with the FAL gives us a 52 round magazine. Adding in strained allows us to do some absolute top tier pew pew. However, the big issue with this build is we're running True Patriot. Now I know there's going to be a lot of True Patriot fanboys out there, or fangirls. I respect you. However, True Patriot is a pretty mediocre, lackluster, not that good of a set. I just like running it because fireworks, I never get bored of it. It's like when you get a series of chain headshots with Regulus and you're just like, oh yeah, let me just Alt F4 and wank. It's just incredibly satisfying. The synergy with this is just quite simply 30% increase in mag size with FAL. The big issue with FAL is in longer, drawn-out fights, the FAL will fall short, incredibly short, just because you don't have the capacity of other ARs. So in order to get it onto a more even footing, you do need to increase the mag size, which is a double-edged sword. Simply just because the only ways you're really able to do that is to, 1, go 3-piece Brazos, which is going to tank your build, or go 4-piece True Patriot. If you are able to get a red True Patriot, this is going to be your best option. And I'm aware a lot of people can go, oh, but True Patriot's a buff set. Yeah, for absolutely no one. I get that True Patriot does apply some okay-ish team buffs. It can be worthwhile, it is nice to have, but it does not make or break the build. Honestly, your best bet would be to just either go full whack into a True Patriot DPS build or just run Future Initiative. It will do more. Comparing True Patriot to a buff set is kind of like buying the fanciest car ever, the car of your dreams, and then refusing to drive it until you put a one of those absolutely god-awful pine air freshener things on your rear view mirror. The main reason this doesn't really work too well as a buff build is quite simply the buffs are on a rotation, a 2-second rotation, which means if you are unable to basically apply your buffs to literally everything within the 2 seconds, that, such as the red buff, amplifies enemies' damage taken by 8%, unless you're able to literally hit everything within range for you and your allies within those 2 seconds, you're kind of wasting time. You'd be better off just putting FI on and just throwing a chem on the ground to keep your allies topped off. As such, it is better overall to just whack this on as the standard DPS build, play solo or casually in a group, as this can perform pretty well in a group. It does okay. It's not the best thing going, but it's just that little nice bit extra that helps out, and that's literally all True Patriot is. It's that little bit of nice extra fluffy that helps out. I have tried this in Legendary. True Patriot is actually quite funny in Legendary just because you're simply able to build up full flag on everything. So everything becomes a damn Katy Perry song. I made a pop culture reference. You better bloody like this video. Now, when I say Legendary, I do mean specifically group. There is absolutely no way I would recommend doing a solo Legendary with this build. You will get messed up fast. Although it is probably doable, but you will need to be some seriously top tier player to actually do it, and maybe not run glass cannon. Overall, this build is actually pretty good. The DPS is absolutely usable. I do use it particularly when playing with randoms, and I have done Legendary in group with it. It is a very fun build, especially when you just start exploding everything to be a firework. Up next, we have the infamous Bro build, which I have covered like 30 times on this bloody channel, just because it is potentially one of, if not the strongest skill build. So we have 2-piece Brazos, 3-piece Empress. You will need skill damage and then crit rolls in as many places as possible. This effectively gives you 6 yellow, 6 red cores, provided you're using Capacitor. Simply just because Capacitor scales off yellow cores by half of a red core, 7.5%. So if we're at 6 yellow, that effectively means that Capacitor is going to take effect of 3 red. But then we also just have 3 red cores. So we have skill tier 6 for our skills, but we also get the effect of 6 red cores for Capacitor. Some good crit chance, crit damage in there, just because Capacitor's mods are absolutely bonkers, which is probably the best plus side of this weapon. It really is just an overall hybrid weapon. Now, the power of this build doesn't really actually come from the skills itself. The skills are a little bit under what you would normally consider to be a top tier skill build. It works out to approximately 10 to 15% total skill damage. So in terms of like your skills, overall DPS and output, on this build they will do 15% less. However, you're doing 80% more with Capacitor. Now, this is actually not the most optimal setup for it. I just like running Memento 1 for the skill haste, because when you pick up the little trophies from Memento, you get 1% skill efficiency, which is what it's mainly there for. That 1% skill efficiency is going to give you 1% skill damage, 1% skill health, 1% skill duration, 1% skill haste, which will allow us to eventually get up to 30% skill haste. The more optimal setup for this is to run the named Hanayu backpack for perfect combined arms. It's called Force Multiplier, and you would want a skill damage roll, and then you would want a crit chance roll to then put a crit damage mod in, or skill damage roll with a crit damage roll and then put a crit chance mod in. Essentially, overall, through whatever combination you need, you want skill tier, skill damage, crit chance. How you want to do that is entirely up to you. That is effectively the more optimal setup, because this will also give you 30% skill damage while also supplementing the loss of a red core with a crit chance, crit damage roll on the backpack. Where I'm just using Memento, all I actually end up getting is just a crit chance mod, essentially. Now, despite Memento, this does perform very well in group as well as in legendary. Typically, if I've harassed Rise long enough and he decides to join my wonderful EU server with his absolute dogshit Aussie net, he will typically play this build in multiplayer, open world missions, and including legendary. And if he can perform brilliantly and still out DPS a lot of players on 300 ping with this build, then I'm pretty sure others can as well. Since actually discovering this build, I now basically refuse to even look at most skill builds because they actually do not perform as high as this. I've seen a load of weird and wacky stuff coming out of varying different places, all ranting and raving about X, Y, and Z. And after directly building and comparing or just doing spreadsheets, this mostly outperforms them. There's only technically 2 skill builds that actually out DPS this. Well, 3 if we include just changing the backpack on this build to Force Multiplier. One of which is a Striker's skill build, and the only reason that out DPSs it is simply just because of the Striker's set. You lose near enough 40% output from your skills, but you near enough double the output from your actual weapon. So yeah, there's that. The other one is Negotiators, and that's basically building a crit skill build with Negotiators to transfer all of the damage. So far, from all of the testing that I have done, Rigger, Hardwired, high-end skill build, ongoing directive, etc., none of them actually come close to the performance of this. They'll either do 10 to 15, sometimes 20% more output on the skills, but then they lose near enough 60% on the weapon. And considering this is designed to be completely all-inclusive, both skills and weapon, they're just not able to compete. The only way in which you're able to compete is if you're able to utilize both skills and weapons simultaneously and everything do a decent amount of damage, such as Strikers and Negotiator skill builds. That's literally it. So in terms of overall output and skill build, this is probably the best one that I have seen so far. The only reason Strikers wins is, like I said, the Strikers buff. Guess what Strikers gives to your skills? Nothing. Is it really a skill build? I would argue not, especially considering that you can do near enough double if you just went for a red Strikers build. Same again with Negotiators. I personally don't see the point in putting them to skill builds, simply just because they will do vastly more as a DPS build rather than a skill build. The survivability of this as well is actually kind of surprising due to the aggro generation and the armor regen of both the skills as well as memento. It does mean that if you do get caught in the open, you have literally no answer, just because you're going to have to try and get all of your skills to ping the same target as well as shoot them and pray to God that it's enough to deal with the ads. Adding in the fact that the turret is stationary and the drone likes to get stuck, this isn't always the best option. Up next, we have what I like to call the Sacrificial Striker. It is 4-piece strikers, the gift backpack, and then a FAMAS with preservation. Weirdly, this will just about outperform a striker's DPS build using the striker's backpack. It mainly outperforms it on headshots, but it does also outperform it by like 0.82% on body shots. However, the downside to this is you have literally sacrificed all of your utility that you have built into your standard strikers build just for essentially an extra 1% DPS. The utility of this build all comes from pure output, which is one of the reasons I've put preservation on my AR. Now, weirdly, this build actually performs worse solo, simply just because all of the aggro is on you, you have zero utility. If you get cornered or pushed, you have no choice but to hide and then try and pick things apart one at a time, often slowing down the progression of whatever it is you're doing. In group, where there's 4 of you, or well, more than one of you really, it performs beautifully, and it does absolutely crazy DPS and can chew through most things very quickly. This is also a build that will absolutely tear Legendary a new one. I can't actually remember how long ago it was, where I showed using the sacrifice in Legendary doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go down all the time. I completed it in a group of 4. I went down once, where others went down 2+ times. I did more than enough damage. I actually did the most damage, and it worked perfectly fine. So this is actually the build that I tend to use if playing with randoms doing Legendary. This is the build I will use. 4-piece strikers, the sacrifice, the gift. It has 60% crit chance, 122% critical hit damage. It has higher upfront damage because I'm not completely relying on the stacks. I have Perfect Glass Cannon multiplying with Vigilance to give me my immediate boost in damage, and from there I'm just building up striker stacks. In terms of sheer multiplicative output, this does typically beat, like I said earlier, strikers with a backpack. Strikers with backpack and then adding in something like Obliterate will give you a total of a 1.5 multiplier. Using Perfect Glass Cannon, Vigilance, and then 4-piece strikers, we do 1.3 times 1.25 times 1.65. This gives us a 1.68 multiplier. So effectively we're doing 18% more. We are able to make up with the strikers backpack build a little bit more, simply just because we're able to use coyotes with it. But in terms of the sheer output, this will do more. But like I said, I don't typically recommend this build to anyone because it really is balls to the wall, DPS now, because if you're not doing DPS, you will die. The entire purpose, premise, utility, and function of this build is to do damage. Then adding in the fact that we're running preservation as essentially our only utility other than just all of the deeps. This also means that in order to actually be survivable, we need to actually kill things. So we effectively, running Gunner, have 20% armor on kill, 30% if we get a headshot. But again, this is armor on kill. In order to actually activate any of this, we have to kill. It is one of my favourite builds. It is typically what I do when running around solo and being a mindless goon. This is the build I use. It's my standard go-to open world build. I love it. It's very fun. It forces me to play aggressive, which is what I like. And the overall effect of it, particularly including up to legendary, is absolutely devastating. It does dumb damage. It's very powerful. Now, I have tried incorporating St. Elmo's into this. It's weird. Where at the moment I'm at 60 crit chance, 122 critical hit damage. If you incorporate Elmo's into this, you can get 58 crit chance, 161 critical hit damage, which is obviously going to be more DPS, despite the fact that we are going to have an RPM loss because of the fact that we're just gaining like near enough 40% critical hit damage. This will negate the RPM loss. The problem is we lose preservation, and due to the fact that our only utility is gaining armor on kill, sure, we can kill things quick enough, but if at any point we are overwhelmed, if we don't have shock ammo, we're just dead. And there's near enough nothing you can do to even come back or try and negate it, which does lead into having a pretty huge problem. So Elmo's on this build. If you do want to try it or play around with it, it does work. It is absolutely viable. However, despite the fact that I do more DPS, which is a great utility to have, not having any form of backup other than every 3 magazines you get shock ammo, which is not consistent, I find it to be very unreliable and can be very, very problematic. This was actually the first build I put Elmo's on, and after playing with it for about a day, I very promptly put my Preservation FAMAS back on, simply just because the DPS increase, sure, it was nice, but it wasn't really that noticeable, but me dying every 2 seconds was noticeable. For the last one on this list, we're going to completely forget that I am absolutely awesome at headhunting. I'm not. I am terrible. So we're not going to forget that I'm terrible at headhunting. We're going to remember that and just add that in. That's just going to stay there for the remainder of the video, just in case you forget. So we're running 4 pieces, tip of the spear, including the backpack, which gives us a huge uptime on the TAC 50 ammo. Headhunter, obviously, and running Dod City Holster. The reason we're running Dod City Holster is we are running 2 MMRs, the White Death with preservation on. Got a bit of a preservation thing going on at the moment. And of course, Nemesis. Obviously, we can't forget about the TAC 50 itself because we are running Tip of the Spear, which will generate 2 ammo for the TAC 50 every minute. This allows us to have near enough 100% uptime on the Tip of the Spear buff, or if we do feel the need to absolutely spam something with a TAC 50, we should have plenty of ammo should that need arise. So, remembering that I am absolutely terrible at headhunting, this build is actually probably one of the more powerful MMR builds in the game. Now, depending on how you want to set it up, you could actually argue this is the most powerful MMR build in the game, simply just because it allows for a huge amount of uptime with the TAC 50, and the TAC 50 does absolutely ridiculous damage. That is literally the only thing that gives it that much power, is we're just generating TAC 50 ammo. So if we're going to quantify the power of an MMR build by how regularly you get to use the most powerful MMR, probably the most powerful weapon individually in the game, it would be Tip of the Spear with the backpack. Obviously, if you want to run 4-piece Tip of the Spear and then use a Headhunter chest and then a Vigilance or even a Concussion backpack, this will give you more damage on things like White Death, Nemesis, etc, etc, but both of them again pale in comparison compared to what the TAC 50 can do. So how you want to rate their power is entirely up to you. I quite like the TAC 50. It's got like a special place in my heart, but it is just categorically just the best thing about utilizing Tip of the Spear. While utilizing Tip of the Spear with the backpack, you will essentially have double the uptime of another Tip of the Spear build without the backpack. And then obviously Hotshot is the next one on there, and in terms of comparison, what the Hotshot set is able to give you, Tip of the Spear does outperform it. Again though, only reason being TAC 50. The main premise of any of these MMR builds is actually mostly null and void. 99% of all of your damage is literally coming from Headhunter. It really doesn't actually matter what the other 5 pieces are. I would personally argue something like Dodge City Holster is going to be best in slot on something like an MMR build, because if you do get rushed, have a D50 with a Dodge City charge. You can solve pretty much all rush problems from there. Sure, you might waste a stack, but wasting a stack, getting slapped with a baton, I'd waste the stack personally. So my personal opinion is on pretty much the majority of MMR builds, something like Dodge City Holster might not be best in slot, that's probably the wrong term, but absolutely amazingly god tier useful, suppose you could put in an argument for. Now the next thing you need to know with a tip of the spear build, or any MMR build really, is how to bloody aim. So don't look at this for a perfect demonstration. This is a perfect demonstration on how not to do it. As such, I do not rate MMR builds in Legendary or in multiplayer, but I'm pretty sure my view on this is completely biased because I absolutely suck at it. I have seen Rise of Brutality, Hutchler, Reslivo, a multitude of other players that I hang around and have played with play Headhunter sniper builds in both multiplayer as well as Legendary, and they perform beautifully. So I'm pretty sure the only reason I'm saying that they don't work in multiplayer is because I absolutely suck. That being said, there is a good group of people that will argue that sniping in Legendary missions is not the smartest thing to do. Sure, it can work, but you're going to spend half your time running around in a circle, trying to get out of the way of things and using your armor kits, which honestly, I've never sniped in a Legendary mission. That's what I hear, that's what people tell me. I don't know if it's accurate, but the people that tell me these things are pretty awesome and reputable players of whom I respect, so I will respect their opinion. I'm not going to make any judgment on it because I probably couldn't even get through the friggin' start line. I can't even deal with this dude cleanly. So yeah, that is the 4 builds that I run here. I very rarely use the tip of the spear build, but it is quite fun to just whack out on occasion just because attack 50. So, my overall thoughts and views on this build is quite simply summed up by me going, TAC 50. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video. Have fun, good luck, don't die. It's bad for the health.